gods had been invited to dinner. Not an unusual event. The gods of Olympus attended feasts regularly, at each other's palaces, at the courts of favored mortals, at celebrations that lasted days. But this invitation was different. The host was Tantalus, king of Sipylus, son of Zeus himself, the most honored mortal in the ancient world, a man so favored by the gods that he had been invited to dine on Olympus, had eaten ambrosia at Zeus's own table, had been trusted with divine secrets no mortal was ever meant to know. He had set the table himself, prepared the feast himself, chosen the main course himself. When the gods lifted the lids from the serving dishes, they found the dismembered body of a child, his son, Pelops, 12 years old, boiled, seasoned, and presented to the gods of Olympus as the evening meal. That is where the story of Tantalus begins, and it gets darker from there. In the next 10 minutes, you're going to find out 3 things that make Tantalus the most disturbing figure in all of Greek mythology. Why a man who had everything, divine favor, immortal food, access to Olympus itself, chose to do the single most unforgivable thing in the ancient world. What the gods did when they realized what was on the table, and why one of them almost ate it, and the punishment Zeus designed specifically for Tantalus, which was not just torture. It was the cruelest possible version of the thing Tantalus had spent his entire life chasing. To understand what Tantalus did, you have to understand what he had. He was the son of Zeus, not a descendant, a direct son, which in the Greek world meant something almost incomprehensible. While other mortals prayed to the gods from a distance, made offerings, hoped for divine attention, Tantalus had a seat at their table, literally. Zeus invited him to Olympus. He ate ambrosia, the food of the gods, the substance that grants immortality. He drank nectar. He sat among immortals as an equal. He heard conversations between gods that no human ear was ever meant to receive. He was given everything, and then he was sent back to Earth, still mortal, still aging, still going to die. The Greeks don't tell us explicitly what happened inside Tantalus's mind during those years after Olympus, but the myth shows us the result. A man who had tasted immortality and been returned to mortality, who had sat with gods and been reminded he was human, who had been trusted with divine secrets and couldn't tell anyone because no one would believe him, and no one was worthy of hearing them. He started stealing from Olympus, nectar and ambrosia, the food of the gods. He began smuggling out and sharing with his mortal friends. A desperate attempt to elevate himself back to where he had been, to feel again what he had felt at that table. Then he stole something else, the golden dog, a divine animal that had guarded the infant Zeus on Crete, a sacred object, irreplaceable. He lied to the gods when they asked about it, looked them in the eye and denied it. A man who had eaten with Zeus, lying to Zeus. Something had broken inside him, and what came next proved it completely. Here is what nobody talks about. The gods almost failed the test. When the serving dishes were uncovered and the truth was revealed, most of the gods recoiled immediately. The feast was abandoned. The horror was instant, but one goddess had already eaten. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, goddess of the earth, mother of Persephone, had been distracted, grieving, lost in thought about her daughter's abduction to the underworld. She had eaten a piece of Pelops's shoulder before anyone could stop her. The most maternal goddess in the entire Greek pantheon, the one whose identity was built entirely around the love between a mother and a child, had unknowingly consumed a child because of Tantalus. Here is what nobody talks about. Every mythology source that covers Tantalus describes what he did as a test. He wanted to test the gods, to see if they were truly omniscient, if they actually knew everything, or if their divine knowledge could be fooled. Think about what that means. He didn't do it in a moment of madness. He didn't do it accidentally. He planned it, deliberately, carefully. He killed his son, prepared his body, set the table, and waited to see if the gods would notice. That is not a monster acting on instinct. That is a man conducting an experiment. Using his child as the variable, the gods reassembled the body. This is the part every mythology channel rushes past, because what comes next is the famous punishment. But the reassembly is the most important moment in the entire story. They gathered the pieces of Pelops. They placed them in a sacred cauldron. And the Fates, the three women who controlled the destiny of gods and mortals alike, brought him back, perfectly, completely, except for the shoulder Demeter had consumed. Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, forged him a new shoulder, from ivory, brilliant white, inlaid with gold, more beautiful than the original. And Pelops lived. He went on to become one of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology. He won a chariot race that gave him a kingdom. His descendants became the royal houses of Mycenae and Sparta. The Trojan War was fought by his grandchildren. The entire sweep of Greek heroic mythology flows from a boy his father killed and the gods brought back. And Tantalus. Zeus designed a punishment so precise, so architecturally perfect in its cruelty, that it gave us a word we still use today. Tantalus was placed in a pool of water in Tartarus. The water reached his chin. Above him hung branches heavy with ripe fruit, figs, apples, pears, pomegranates. When he bent to drink, the water receded. Every time. Instantly. The moment his lips touched the surface, it dropped below his reach. When he reached for the fruit, the branches pulled away. Every time, without exception. The moment his fingers extended, the branches lifted beyond his grasp. He could see the water, smell it, feel it on his skin. He could never drink. He could see the fruit, smell it, watch it hang inches from his hand. He could never eat. The man who had stolen divine food, who had fed a child to the gods to test their omniscience, who had spent his life trying to possess what he had been given and then taken away, was condemned to spend eternity surrounded by everything he craved, never able to touch any of it. The Greeks called this Tantalus's punishment. We call it tantalizing. The word entered the English language from his name. Every time you say something is tantalizing, every time you describe something you can see but not reach, you are referencing the specific torture Zeus built for the man who cooked his son. But here is the layer that changes everything. The curse didn't die with Tantalus. His bloodline carried it forward for generations. His son Pelops, the one he killed and the gods resurrected, grew up to win a kingdom through a chariot race he rigged. He bribed his opponent to sabotage the king's chariot. The king died. Pelops won. His opponent dying cursed the house of Pelops. That curse passed to Pelops' sons, Atreus and Thyestes. Atreus, in a dispute over the throne, killed Thyestes' children, cooked them, served them to their father at a banquet. The exact same crime, 1 generation later. Thyestes' son Aegisthus survived and eventually killed Atreus. Atreus' son Agamemnon led the Greeks to Troy. When Agamemnon returned from Troy, his wife murdered him. His son Orestes murdered his mother in revenge. The Furies hunted Orestes for matricide. 1 family, 7 generations. An unbroken chain of children killed by parents, parents killed by children, betrayal, murder, cannibalism, and divine punishment. All of it flowing from one dinner table in Sipylus, where a king decided to test the gods, using his son. The Greeks had a word for this too. 8. Divine ruin that passes through bloodlines. The idea that the worst acts don't just punish the person who commits them. They corrupt everything that comes after. Tantalus didn't just destroy himself. He poisoned every generation that carried his name. So here is what I need you to decide. Tantalus had been given everything a mortal could receive. Divine parentage, access to Olympus, immortal food, the trust of the gods. And he spent it all on a test. Was he the most evil king in Greek mythology because of what he did? Or was he the most tragic, a man who had touched something infinite, been returned to something finite, and broke completely trying to get back? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. Read.